Next agenda item, number 7, upland game snap request.
Mark Farman, for the record, wildlife staff specialist with the Habitat Division. The next agenda item deals with upland game bird stamp projects. We, just like the duck stamp projects, we submitted a separate report on that topic, which hopefully you all have. There's a wide variety of projects listed on page 18 of that report. And page 19 has the budget status, which I wanted us to review briefly. We're seeking funding for $271,050, which, when taken into account with FY13 expenditures and beginning and end of year balances, we're expecting to end up with roughly $360,000 at the end of fiscal year 14. And before I turn over the microphone to Sean, who's going to say a few words about some of the upland game bird species issues we're dealing with, I just wanted to give you a quick overview on some of the water development activities. Basically, we have to make maintenance and inspections our highest priority on the small game side with an exception I'll get into in a minute. If you read the project status reports, you'll probably see we were very busy with inspections and minor repairs. We made 130 inspections and minor repairs in the north, 343 in the south. A lot of the funding of the level B money goes to our labor costs. Our biologists actually charge those codes for a lot of their time on that work. We did have a couple major rebuilds in the north and fence replacements. Something we're excited about in the south is we have some new mountain quail construction. Our guzzlers will benefit mountain quail in the long term. In the short term, they'll benefit other types of quail species, but in the long term, we're going to work with Sean for Lincoln County transplanted mountain quail in the northern part of Lincoln County, which we have received NEPA clearance on. So we're going to be constructing 6 or 7 new units in I think it's Cloverdale Mountains in northern Lincoln County, hopefully this summer. The ones in Esmeralda are being placed in a location that's next to an existing mountain quail population. It's one range over in the western part of Esmeralda near the California border. So we're hoping that that population will expand without the need of translocating any birds. So that represents new construction in the coming year. And another thing we're trying to step up is getting some of our volunteer groups more involved in small game projects, especially in the north. Some of them have expressed an interest that they want to be more involved, primarily chukar hunters that want to get involved. And we're concerned with the extremely dry conditions in the western and northwestern part of the state that we may have to do some water hauling by truck for some of those units. So one idea we've had is to get the volunteers involved in both bird counts and then possibly some water hauling if it's a high priority area that has proven populations at risk. So we're coordinating with the game division right now on that. So before I turn over the mic to Sean, are there any questions regarding the overall program or the water development program?
I do. Anybody else before I go? On the monitoring of the small game developments, we do have monitoring of the large big game developments, and the attorney put in funding through the Heritage account for flight survey projects at a total of $9,000 each.
sources of three funding sources for helicopter time, because keep in mind, a lot of the inspections are done by air. So our biologists will both inspect and conduct minor repairs. Typically, they'll fly 7, 8 days in a row, and they're super productive. They'll touch down over 100 times, and they do a lot of work. The work in these tables is, a lot of it's done via helicopter. So our funding sources are the federal grant that pays the bulk of our project work, both big and small. We have some donations from the Nevada Trucker Foundation and Virgin County Truckers Unlimited, and we're using half donation money and half federal grant money to pay for northern Nevada flights. But because we're working on big and small game at the same time on those flights, we very carefully divide the money up, because the donation money I just mentioned and the money that we're asking for approval here, which is Upland Game Bird, can only be used for small game unit work. It's not allowed, we can't use it for big game unit work. So in the south, that's why we split the costs as I just described. In the south, the fraternity, of course, wants the money that's whatever they, because keep in mind, they're donating their own money and time in addition to the heritage money they're asking for. They, of course, want that money to be used for big game units, which is not the purpose of this funding. And the big game units, of course, are primarily for the benefit of bighorn sheep when it comes to the fraternity work.
But I haven't seen a concern that keeps a checker off the big game development.
You're right, they do benefit, but
Yeah.
in terms of program management, we've been very careful to manage it the way I just described, because, we don't want to run into hot water if someone's saying you're spending Upland Game Bird money to benefit bighorn sheep, because you're talking large volume guzzlers in bighorn sheep territory, and sure, you're right, other species, including non-game species, do benefit from all guzzlers, whether it's small or big. But it may not be appropriate to use Upland Game Bird stamp money for bighorn sheep work.
And that's where I'm having a dilemma, because a lot of these places, there is not a single small game guzzler in the area. We do have upland birds in the area, and the only thing keeping them there are the large water developments. And I wouldn't call it a bighorn sheep development, I would call it a wildlife development, and that's why I think it's an appropriate use of the funds.
You make a good point, that's never been brought up before. I'm just telling you the history of how we've managed the program.
Yeah. And I'm looking at Tony, and Patrick's not in here, I'm going, if I'm pushing an issue that I shouldn't, I need to know, but part of the reason I short funded, or proposed short funding, was I knew there was other buckets that we could look at. And this was specifically one of the buckets that I brought up during those discussions. So,
Rich may want to, sorry, Rich. Maybe I had a good time.
Let's see, you can show it.
I heard something about buckets.
I guess the question would be if there's anything that designates those big game units, or has designated them as big game units, for funding historically, that would be exclusive to the small game. And I don't know that there is or ever has been.
Yeah, I inherited the program from someone else, and as far as I know, everything I just told you about how it's managed and funding sources, none of that is in NAC or NRS, or, it's basically the way it's been done. And as you might imagine, there's a lot of politics associated with how, whether it's a donation from NCF or Carson Valley Chucker Club, they want that money to be used for the small game species. The fraternity wants that money to be used for bighorn sheep. We do a lot of work with NBU, so we're working on again, it does benefit all wildlife species, but when NBU sends out a small army of volunteers and pays for all the trucks and so forth, which we capture as in-kind donations for federal grant matching purposes, it's pretty clear that NBU is trying to enhance water sources for big game species, basically bighorn sheep, pronghorn elk, etc. So we've always looked at things as big, you know, we call them target species. So the target species are, as I just said, bighorn or pronghorn or mule deer, or the quote-unquote big game units. Target species for the small game units are various quail, sage grouse, etc. And chukar and other species indirectly benefits. That's just the way we've managed the program.
So as long as we could document they were dual use, you know, I don't think we'd have a problem.
And I mean, I'm not the only commissioner going that direction, and it's gonna come to our votes. But, you know, being a former board member in NBU, target species was definitely bighorn sheep, or sometimes elk, or sometimes antelope. But it was with full knowledge, it wasn't for sheep or elk, it was for the wildlife to stay in that, and that's the bylaws, is for the wildlife to stay in that, more so than one species, it was for the whole. And I think what I'm trying to get to is look at for the whole, again, with this money, and enable the fraternity to have full funding, but not out of just one bucket. Commissioner Rain.
There are 4 projects in the wildlife damage management plan that are for sage grouse, project 21, 29, 33, 34. And they would be more correctly funded underneath this program, because they're upland game bird animals. And those projects would be much more appropriately funded out of here rather than there. The $3 money comes from only big game, as we know, and it's kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about here. So, you know, it's the same thing with different projects. Those should be designated primarily for big game, and we have seemed to have flopped over at least the proposed projects. But those should be funded out of here. Maybe some of these should be funded out of there, and then you at least, you know, be in your right species. I got really no issue with, you know, your point of view as far as that. I'm okay with that. But those should also be funded out of this money. If not all of them, at least the majority of them, because they are directly upland game bird in there, and some of them are for only. The only benefiting species is going to be sage grouse, likely, in those projects. Why aren't they included in this plan? How did they get moved over to what I'm calling the wrong place? The wrong funding source.
I'm not aware of how different projects are divided up between heritage versus this. I'm sorry, I can't tell you what.
Staff designates it and kind of comes to the commission, and we rang about it and talked about it, but, you know, it's designated by staff. That's the origination of all these, you know, proposals.
I know one difference to keep in mind is, one thing that's unique about the, collectively, we call the 4 wildlife reserve accounts that I manage the level B accounts. This is 2 out of the 4. One thing that's unique about all 4 is it has to be managed and run by an NDOW employee. And as I understand it, Heritage and DreamTag, I believe, can be proposed by outside entities. So right there, that's one key difference, is either all not only managed by NDOW employees, but the NDOW employees actually write these proposals that you see in the report, so that's one unique difference.
My understanding is projects 21, 29, 33, and 34 were written by Park and Wildlife personnel, isn't that correct?
I'm talking about heritage and
Okay.
DreamTag projects. That's it, I'm trying to
Okay.
draw a distinction between the programs.
What about the projects I'm referring to?
The projects you're referring to are not inclusive in the 4 that he's talking about. We have a myriad of funding opportunities, and the mechanisms by which employees make proposals and submit to those are varied. Some of them are more onerous than others, but the $3 fee projects are independent of the projects that Mr. Farm representing here today.
I'm submitting that those projects should be funded through this mechanism, because this mechanism, the upland game bird money, is for in general, the propagation of upland game bird.
Yeah, I think.
You know what I'm at?
I do, I see where you are. I think the challenge is that all of these projects have multiple benefits. They all have multiple applications. fish, to wildlife, to big game, to upland game, to the habitats on which they depend. And there isn't a single bottleneck or nexus where they all come together. So independent proposals through each of these projects can overlap or can appear to be better suited for one mechanism than the other. I guess ultimately, there's value in them or they wouldn't have made it this far. Whether or not there's different funding that's more appropriate for one than the other may all be moot if they're all funded in the end anyhow. I don't know.
I'll just point out to Commissioner Ames that 502-253, 1B, wildlife management activities related to protection of non-predatory game animals, sensitive wildlife species, and related wildlife habitats are proper settings for the CLP. I think safe grouse for sensitive wildlife species is in the minimum.
The point is that the money should come from the fund as close as it reasonably can from this funding source for that species. And while I have no issue with a little bit of overlap from time to time, in this case, let's pick on a project, the 29, the roadkill removal for greater sage-grouse, and that's from Wildlife Damage Management. Why that is not funded through this, I mean, that's strictly the purpose. That really has nothing to do with the predation aspect, which traditionally in those other plans. Zero. It would fit in very well with the upland game bird funding. While perhaps legally you could fund it from either source, it would more correctly, more aptly come from upland game bird stamp than the other.
I think the challenge is the complexity of the ecosystem and the interrelatedness of everything, and then the difficulty of trying to parse it out and compartmentalize it through these processes. The roadkill projects has everything to do with predation because it's intended to address predation of sage-grouse eggs by ravens and reducing human subsidies to the ravens. So it is a predator control aspect in reducing predators and predation on sage-grouse. But again, it's challenging to parse these out and compartmentalize them into individual things when they are all interrelated in the ecosystem.
Why haven't we directed some of these other projects to come from sage-grouse money? We have reasonable balance for sage-grouse money, the other money could be used for the other. Haven't we directed personnel to try to maybe even double source them if it's the favor of the commission to spend some of that $3 money, which I don't think it's appropriate personally, because $3 money, it's on a big game tag application, says predation management, big game and big game only. This other comes from a stamp for upland games. I think it's appropriate. Why not? Why not try to double source? Why not get half out each? If that's, I think it's half and half. I mean, it is for upland game, right?
I think the part of the challenge there is, when you say half and half, now you just double not only the proposal requirements, but the reporting requirements at the conclusion of the project. So,
Or half the projects. Doesn't have to be half the funding, half the projects, something. You know what I mean? Doesn't have to be half the funding. We look at it in a lot of ways. I think it's more appropriate in this end venue. They should be addressed here, not there. That should be part of this deal. What I'm trying to throw out. What can you say?
The dilemma I see is we have three buckets of money we're dealing with here. We have truck stamp money, upland money, and heritage money. I'm trying to blend three accounts to best fund wildlife projects and stay in that.
Or was it $3?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got a lot of buckets today we're dealing with. Let's have an appropriate plan, and it really doesn't matter what bucket it comes out of. It's just maximizing our dollars and our efforts towards wildlife and saving that. The question I have is the $271,050 proposed in upland, where did we derive that dollar amount? And if I wanna get $12,000 for flight time, and that's for other commissioners, that's a good thing to do. Do we have to reduce other projects in the $271,000, or can we do it in addition to? Do we have room to go in excess excess of the $271 and make it $283,050.
You want my opinion on that?
I've got bored right here in front of me. It's a question to whoever wants to answer it.
Well, I can tell, again, remember, these are all different NDOW employees. To answer your question, where does that come from? It's the sum total of all the NDOW employees' proposals.
So he's asking if there's balance available.
Well, yeah, so keeping, the reason I said that is keeping in mind, if the purpose was to fund helicopter time, it would primarily benefit big game species and indirectly benefit small game species. If you don't augment the total here, you're gonna have to take it out of someone's project, is what I'm trying to say. So basically, the most logical place to do that would be the Southern Nevada Water Development Program project. So that means we would have to redirect our priorities, because we have, I think, $80,000 in the budget for small game emphasis, Southern Nevada Railroad. So to me, the two choices are augment, which means not changing the scope of work on any of the proposals in here, or if you were gonna change the scope, instead of doing it to someone else's project, you probably want to do it to the water development proposal, but that means changing the scope of the $80,000 project. Does that make sense?
I have a question, Ben, I think I understand what you're saying. So because there has been no project proposal from the NDOW employee with respect to these projects, there can't be an independent, we can't independently allocate $12,000.
No, I didn't say that. I don't know if, I'm saying the benefit of augmenting this 271,050 by 12,000 is you don't have to change the scope of work of any of the existing proposals. And I think you have the authority to do that, but you would have to talk to the deputy director, Tony or Kristen about that, because I think you have the authority to approve a not to exceed amount, and then it's up to staff to figure out how to spend that money, I believe. But you can put conditions on it and so forth. I think that's how it works. So to answer your question, you don't have to write a proposal like you have in the back.
What I'm looking at is the $271,050, is that a number that we're comfortable going up to, or is there a statutory cap that says we
There's
get?
no statutory cap.
Then we're fine, we could make that $283,50,
Yes.
increase Southern Nevada small game water development budget from $80,000 to $92,000, with an assumption that that $12,000 gets allocated to those 4 flights for returning to Big Machine. I'm getting some good head nods, so that's good.
How do the dollars get to the
I think that would work, except please keep in mind at the beginning of the report is the NRS guidance on how money from this account has to be used. So I think you would be careful in the wording of such a motion so that somewhere in there Upland Game Birds shows up as benefiting from that extra money, because as you can see from NRS, the money from Upland Game Birds stamp must be used to protect and propagate upland game birds or enhance their habitat. So if you were to supplement this total and say it was only going to be used for bighorn sheep flights, someone may say you're not in the spirit of that NRS section.
But with as many trail cams as we have currently, I'm sure we have documented use of all kinds of upland bird. Many of our big game water developments, or classified as big game, but they're just wildlife water developments.
We have a quick question for Patrick, the mechanism to deliver to the fraternity would be a sub-grant or something like that?
Yes.
Can I read the provision?
I'm sorry?
Can I read the provision?
Sure.
Money received pursuant to NRS 502-292 must be used for projects approved by the Commission for the protection and propagation of upland game birds and for the acquisition, development, and preservation of the habitats of upland game birds in this state. And so I think it's incumbent that it be conditioned on allocating for flights that are, where there's documented upland game bird use, is what you're saying.
Right, that's what I'm saying, because I think Commissioner Robb is correct that upland game birds do benefit from all water developments, but there could be a situation at really high elevations, that, I'm not saying it's a problem, but there could be a situation where someone could say that's not truly upland game bird habitat, only bighorn sheep are found out there. I doubt if that's the case. By wording it the way that you just recommended, you would, I think, maximize the chances of someone not saying we're out of compliance with that regulation.
If I was trying to go 50-50 with the money, I'm not just stretching it, but we're taking the bulk of the money out of heritage and just alternating it with this.
Just from a procedural standpoint, I'm a little bit uneasy doing this on the fly, just to make sure everything balances out on your guys' end from a accounting standpoint and everything. So I'm just wondering if it doesn't make sense to look at the heritage project list, if you wanna fund those projects fully out of there, and then provide further direction for August to amend either this plan or either the duck stamp plan, because I know there's a duck request in heritage, so it's cleaner, or everyone's more comfortable with the money rather than doing it all on the fly today. If you guys are comfortable, I guess it's not an issue, but I think we did that last year with some of the sage grouse projects, and coming back in the August meeting and adding a plan, so we had the write-up and everything was very clear. Just a procedural question, I don't know if you have a preference.
Is what I'm proposing pushing you beyond your comfort zone until we are at. I think we're okay.
There are literally hundreds of gophers that can fly. I don't think it'll be a dark condition this year, I think that they'll be able to come over,
Are there any other questions regarding the non-sage grouse, ruffed grouse, one-week sharp-tail that Sean going to talk about?
I think it pretty much exhausted all the questions unless somebody else has another one.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the commission. Sean Espinoza for the record, upland game staff specialist. I guess what I'll do is just provide a brief update of what's happened over the last biennium regarding some of these proposals. If you guys actually, this is a separate document, if you guys have the upland game release plan in your support material, if I could just get you to go to page 11 of that, that kind of summarizes all the projects that were, or actually all the upland game species that were removed. I would consider this last biennium a pretty big success story in terms of what the department's done relatively even in the last 10 years or so, especially with regards to mountain quail, ruffed grouse, and especially sharp-tailed grouse. It's taken us several years to get that sharp-tailed grouse project off the ground. There was a lot of pre-project planning that needed to be done, a lot of coordination with Idaho Fish and Game. But this year we were able to actually get 49 sharp-tailed grouse released in the Bull Run Basin, of which 36 were females and 13 were males. We actually brought 50 over, but one died during transport. Those birds did form one natural lek at the release site, which is encouraging. We actually have a grad student plus a technician, a couple of technicians out on the site following those birds, looking at where those birds are nesting. We've had 41 marked birds out on the site, radio marked birds. They dispersed an average distance of 5 kilometers from the release site. Some birds moved over 10 miles away from the release site and actually came back to nest. Most of them nested within just a few kilometers of the actual release site. We have one bird nesting further south, about 21 miles south in Independence Valley. We've had 12 nests documented and 3 nests failed. We had last week 5 still in incubation and 4 that had hatched out. Average clutch size was 11 eggs. Some broods went from 11 down to 2 in a matter of days. A lot of broods stayed at the 8 to 11 range. So we're pretty excited about that overall. We had 12 total mortalities over the course of the last few months. That's really waned off here. We think that was associated with a raptor migration period. As some of those birds dispersed away from the release site and did these large movements, we feel that that makes them a little bit more susceptible, and those in fact were the ones that seemed to die as opposed to the ones that stayed they were supposed to theoretically. In terms of sage grouse, Commissioner Drew mentioned the project that was basically an expansion on last year's work, and that was we basically purchased 42 satellite units to deploy on sage grouse. We have 7 of those deployed in the Mount Grant EMU in the bi-state area, 7 in the Pinuts. We're going to place 14 in the Desitoya range this fall and next spring, and then 14 are actually going to go to the Tuscarora area as a control for the geothermal facility that's out there. Rough grouse was also a big success story for us, especially last year. We were able to capture 121 rough grouse in state, and we moved into 3 different release locations. 50 went to the North Tuscarora range near Tojam Creek. 45 went to the Pine Forest range, and then 26 went to the Coyote range, which was actually an augmentation of a previous release. Brief update on the Virginia Mountains research project. Research crews up there were able to radio mark an additional 19 individuals up there. They located 15 active nests, although 8 of those failed. There was only 1 re-nest. 3 birds were actually located nesting on State Line Peak, which is in the Fort Sage Mountains, which is right on the border there near Doyle. And if you remember correctly, this was a project that we had identified some issues with raven depredation in the past. The water infrastructure, the habitat's been compromised up there. We had asked Wildlife Services to conduct raven control in that area. That effort was not conducted, so we basically collected another year of pre-treatment data, but there was no raven control conducted in that area. And then I'll leave it at that for now, and if you guys have specific questions regarding the proposals, I can do that now.
Yes, let's see, Chairman of the Predation Management Committee, I'm interested in understanding why Wildlife Service is not able to come and do the project that they should plan there.
We don't know, and I have asked that question to a few employees of Wildlife Services. I have yet to receive a good answer for why. We were very clear in where our priorities were through several correspondence with Wildlife Services. There were some other sites in western Nevada that did not get treatment either, but this was definitely a priority for us, given that we had a research crew to document the results of that effort.
And what was the time period?
The time period of control was going to be late March through basically the month of April is the most effective time to conduct that work.
So nobody from Wildlife Services indicated there were conflicts with other projects they were working on for livestock interests or something?
No, in fact, they were in the area snaring lions during that same time period. So there was work going on there, just not raven control work.
Okay, thank you.
I did meet with State Director Mark Jensen last week, and actually earlier this week, and spoke with him a little bit about this project in particular. And although there was communication going back to last year as far as our they were unaware that it was tied to some research specifically here that looking at the effects of raven predation on sage grouse, what he communicated to me this week. So I think that we're moving in a better direction with our relationship with Wildlife Services. I think it's important that we communicate with them perhaps better than we have historically, and try to focus on these things, give them as much lead time as possible. And this is an example where we have one understanding, they have another. I think better communication, we probably could have avoided this.
Conservation Management Committee was looking at Wildlife Services as the primary contractor, but we identified some issues with Wildlife Services maybe not being able to commit to do projects where we want them and when we want them. And so we're gonna leave ourselves open to being able to look at other resources if they can't commit to do the control projects.
This would be one project that I believe we wouldn't be able to have anybody else do because of the corp side. I think they're the only ones licensed to use that corp side, but there are other opportunities for that, some of the other projects.
Mr. Chairman, good. I believe we have let me see, here now, we have a representative of Wildlife Services here earlier this morning. My opinion, that he might be back to, might be able to readdress those, answers to those questions. I don't know, I don't know. But I think my understanding is they would be very happy to show up and discuss issues if they were ever invited, and it's been a couple of years since they were invited to speak to the commission directly. And I believe that Mr. Wasley has it exactly correct, and that the communication has been extremely lacking and in the past for myriad reasons, and that perhaps with change in leadership of the department and whatnot, that things are changing in a more positive direction, and that these things can be resolved in a reasonable manner. And maybe I'd probably be happy to show up and invited them on the agenda of the committee, the Wildlife Damage Management Committee, right? So I'll change the name.
Yeah.
Not yet, and hopefully not, because hopefully that committee doesn't come to that. But anyways, is that being its goal? But I think there is resolution, and I think they'd be happy to show up before anybody makes any decisions one way or the other in respect to them. Put them on the agenda, bring them in. And they'd be happy to show up.
As I said, I met with Director Mark Jensen earlier this week, and I did invite him to come over, attend the meeting. I think, given the status of Policy 25 and the fact that this was a kind of an informational first reading, that we'd wait and see what kind of direction came out of the commission and then become involved in that process. Again, just with respect to the particular project that we're talking about here, I mean, we can go back and produce emails of communication early on, but I think that the big issue was that they were unaware, not that we had that need, but that it was part of the research project. And I think you saw how delayed we were in our approval of the predator plan last year, and I think that's it's good that we're this far ahead of the game this year. And hopefully it'll give them an opportunity to build these programs into their budget and get the infrastructure necessary to complete them.
Any other questions for Sean? Anything else, Sean? All right.
Yeah.
None of that. Let's take it out to public comment, and we'll bring it back to the commission. Any public comment? Seeing none, bring it up. Go, come on up.
I won't reiterate my congratulations to planning for this, for the record. you know where we stand on the UTV, but now we see the upland stamp money and the duck stamp money buying the same piece of equipment for the management area. But there was an additional concern expressed by the public and all members of our CAT with respect to the purchase of the pheasant chicks for that Mason Valley Wildlife Management Area. We really all felt that that money would be much better directed into some habitat improvement before buying these pheasant chicks for $1,000. Uniform view is they're not going to make it, they're not going to survive, the habitat's not there yet to be introducing these types of pheasant birds to, I believe it's to supplement an existing wild population of pheasants, and if there's any out there, there's not many. So the community really feels that that money could be better directed to some habitat improvements in that wildlife management area rather than spending it on pheasants that we don't believe have a decent chance of survival. So with that, hopefully you take that under consideration.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County Cap. I think Commissioner Drew's point about perhaps reviewing your allocations, you still have the heritage to go. And this point I was trying to get to last night. Jeremy drew attention to the duck stamp. That process is over with, now should reopen it. But I think it would be better to align your projects with the monies that are closest to them. And I have a little concern with putting flight money for the water projects out of the upland game stamp. I know that you can review that as we do have upland game using, but you have the ability right now to make a few adjustments in other places or later in the meeting in your heritage that would allow for that. I want to say thank you, Jeremy, for doing that.
Okay, any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for the motion. Commissioner Beth?
If we were gonna be looking to alternatively augment these flights through Heritage, is that possible? I mean, you're probably closest to the Heritage allocations that you've done, is there any place, how would that work?
Use this one?
Use, in other words, instead of taking the 12,000 and adding to this, how would you do it through Heritage? I guess Rex is, go ahead.
I'll speak to that. I think what Rex is looking to do is, I don't have that right here in front of me, I can get it out, but there is a heritage project that I believe was 19.5 with the request. And we are shifting things around, we're funding it at 10,000. And I think what he's looking at is that we should have taken that 10,000 out of the duck stamp that we did earlier, and then we could use that 10,000 to reallocate to the organization, 12,000 that we should really cut to the other development changes funds. So in order to do that, the way I see it right now, we would have to reopen the duck stamp or have to come back in August with something for the duck stamp that we reapproved. And then during the heritage, take that 10,000 that we recommended on 14/12 and disperse that, we'd still be 2,000 short. But that's the way I understand we can do it, but I don't know how much we can dig back into the duck stamp, how much that's gonna take for us to get back into that, since we've already covered that today.
There's a simpler way to do it, Jack.
Come on up, Fred.
If I could suggest, you'll have Heritage coming up. You have several projects in there that are PJ projects that the Heritage Committee had funded at $25,000, $35,000. Okay, what you can do is you can extend time to the next meeting, you can approve the projects you have here, and then reopen this as you did last year, and let the department come back with a proposal for more upland game stamp money for $12,000 that would help supplement those PJ projects, because those PJ projects are directly related to Lex. That would be a much cleaner way to go. And then when you go into that heritage, you'll deduct 12 out of 1 and fully fund your water developments. That way you don't have to open up your duck stamp money and stuff. I think that'd be a much cleaner way for me to handle that.
Mr. Kate, you know what we're trying to get to, what's the cleanest way in your mind to get there?
I'm not entirely sure where you're trying to get.
We're trying to get $12,000 on top of this, like,
I think what Rex suggested is
okay, with that being said, everybody understand where we are and where we're not. Anybody prepared to make a motion that reflects where we are? Mr. Walsh, you got one?
I can take a stab at it and see if it, yeah, but just to clarify there, we could, when we were kind of discussing there a moment ago, was to, get staff to come back with another upland game project. It will cover project 1403, if we take 12,000 out of its funding and bring back around. Is that kind of where we're going there?
Yeah.
Okay. I move that we approve the proposed fiscal year 2014 Upland Game Bird Stamp projects as presented by the department, but direct them to come back with a project in August for the Upland Game Bird Stamp projects, bring it back to us to approve for the amount of $12,000 that will go to supplement Heritage Project 1403, the Pine Nut Vegetation and Sage Grouse Project, in the amount of $12,000.
Second for discussion.
I have a motion and a second for discussion. Commissioner Moore,
Mr. Chairman, is you said 1403,
Correct.
is that a department project?
I believe so.
Commissioner Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple things. To your surprise, I won't be able to support this motion because, for various reasons, and included in those are there's been quite a bit of talk, and I've heard more of it today from advisory boards about the pheasants not being a reasonable thing, not a survivable project. I do agree that the UTV, once again, as in our previous thing, that that's an inappropriate utilization for this funding. That should come from a different funding source rather than the Upland Game Bird Stamp money. And here you're using now money from ducks, from Upland Game Birds, and from another source, all to purchase a vehicle that it's not appropriate. And furthermore, it's not appropriate that some other projects are being covered under the wildlife damage management projects, being 21, 29, 33, and 34 being their proposed projects. Those projects should be incorporated into this, and the appropriate mechanism would be that don't approve any of this and send it back to the department for revision and putting those projects in the funding source that they do belong to, because it is important where the money comes from. Big game money needs to go to big game projects to the biggest extent possible. Upland Game Bird money should go to Upland Game Bird projects to the largest extent possible. And therefore, those projects should be rewritten into an Upland Game Birds format and brought back at the closest point in time to right now, so that it can go out and cabs can look at that and see whether or not they would prefer, and the public can look at it and see whether or not that is a better funding source for those sage grouse projects rather than the $3 fee